there were hard times ahead for the people of planet Pendulum. Staring into the networks of space and time, their eyes were open. But still, they were blind.
We're here today to mark the 4th anniversary of the 7th of July bombings 2005 in London. We're here at King's Cross, and I thought I'd talk a bit about the BBC documentary, The Latest Conspiracy Files, because instantly they started talking about 7/7 ripple effect, and where they were going with that is they were going to lay out some of the evidence that they could corroborate, and then talk about the person that made it who thinks he's the son of God, and thereby try and discredit everything in the documentary and everything else. But if you look at Michael Jackson, you know, lots of people like his music, we all listen to his music, but he's discredited. There's allegations about him. People like Mike Tyson, a great boxer, some people say. Other people say, you know, he's a very violent man behind the scenes. There's also the director Roman Polanski, who had some allegations of sleeping with a 13-year-old, and yet, you know, if you watch one of his films, that's not part of the story. So, but that's where they were going with it. And they also interviewed another man, Nick Kolstrom, who doesn't believe that Auschwitz was real, and doesn't believe that there were gas chambers there. Just ludicrous people. And if the BBC really wanted to do a proper documentary, they would have done it without, you know, pushing and trying to make everyone sound nuts, okay? But they wouldn't have gone to the loony fringe. They'd have analysed the evidence and they'd have got through it like that. Now, you should go and watch 7/7 Ripple Effect, because there are interesting things in that film. There's a panorama documentary that the BBC did a year before 7/7 2005, where they were talking about how to manage a terrorist bomb, a terrorist training exercise. You can go and watch the footage for yourself. In that there was an MP, there was some police chiefs, and Peter Power, who was there on 7/7 running training exercise. Peter Power on the BBC documentary said only 6 people were involved in that training exercise, where he stated before that 1,000 people were involved. As well as this, other evidence on the ripple effect. There's a New Zealand Herald story of how 3 people were shot dead at Canary Wharf around 9:30 on 7/7. So why didn't they go and interview the New Zealand Herald journalist? Why didn't they go and find out?
That story was also in the South London Press, I may add. Yeah, which, you know, a lot nearer than New Zealand for them to go and investigate. Yeah, sure.
So they left out lots of bits of evidence. They talked about the surveillance cameras not working. Now we are surrounded by surveillance cameras. There's surveillance cameras all over this tube and all the tubes and in the streets. And yet their explanation, like the government's, is, oh, none of them were working. Oh, that's great, isn't it? They don't have any footage of the terrorists stepping onto the trains. Well, that's rubbish. If they got onto those trains, when they say they got onto those trains, then they'll have the footage of it. But maybe the terrorists were on those trains. Maybe they did do the bombs. But let's look at the bombs. They were high explosives. At first they were saying, oh, they're not high explosives, they're made in a bedroom with some chemical fertilizer. Ridiculous. Any doctor, any scientist that looks at the injuries, people were cut in half by those bombs. Sonic blasts. And that is high explosives. And they now come out and said, yes, they were high explosives. Where did they get them from? They couldn't make those in a bathtub. You know, C4, whatever it was. So where did they get them from? Well, maybe they were given the bombs. That could be a possibility. Well, let's look at that. Who had contact with these people before 7/7? And there was a man, Haroon Aswat, and the 3 weeks after 7/7, they said, he's the prime suspect, he's the prime suspect. And the MI5 didn't want to talk to him. They didn't want to discuss him. And it came out on the news that the CIA said he was MI5 asset. So he was working for Al-Qaeda and MI5. And the BBC didn't talk about that. The BBC left out loads of evidence. They just tried to blame it all on these other nutters. And then they mixed in Alex Jones at the end, not saying anything, but trying to attribute him to some of this, some of the nuttery that was said in the show. But it's disgraceful. They could have really gone through all the evidence and really interviewed it and done a proper thing about it. But why haven't they? Why haven't the government done an investigation about 7/7? You know, why not? It's the biggest bombing since the Blitz, you know, most deaths since then, but no investigation. They have a timeline of events, of their events, the way they saw it. What else did the BBC do? Well, they said that the MI5 have gone through 7/7 and said, oh, you know, what happened, what went wrong and stuff. Well, that's like the wolf doing a survey about who killed the sheep. You know, the wolves have done a survey on who killed the sheep. They've concluded that no wolves were guilty. I mean, that's what that is.
Yeah, the BBC basically just echo what Ollie's saying. They just pick their loonies and they discard all the other political analysts and security analysts, lecturers at universities that pick apart the official version. They don't go through the real evidence, you know, the investigative work that goes through trying to go through the anomalies of 7/7. They just pick people like Nick Colostrum, say he's a Holocaust denier, and just discredit the whole movement. It's not good enough.
So another thing that they said in the BBC documentary was that the police chief, Brian Paddick, came on and said, yeah, well, if you're into conspiracy theories, then you're helping the terrorists. I mean, that's ridiculous. What we can't ask questions. It's the way they're trying to really, you know, separate the facts. And we've had people come up here today and say that they were around and they thought the whole thing stunk. They were here on 7/7 at the time. The whole thing stinks. And we just want an investigation. And that will uncover really what happened. But, you know, they don't want one. And if there is one, it'll be a whitewash like everything else. And that's the situation. It's really for people out there to start waking up and start looking at the films. Go and watch Mind the Gap, go and watch Ludicrous Diversions, go and watch 7/7 Ripple Effect. They're all online, it's all free. You can also see or read that book, it's called The London Bombings, 7/7 The London Bombings by Nafis Ahmed. And he's a lecturer in Sussex University. You know, go and do the research. You can't come and talk to people who have done research and spew the BBC lines, because unless you're going to start doing some extra research, then everything you say is null and void. You know, you have to look at the research. Then you can come, we can talk about it, we can debate it, and we can uncover more truth.